Chapter 1. The Whisper of Streets. The city of Naples in the late 1970s was a living paradox, a place where beauty and despair walked arm in arm through narrow cobblestone alleys, where the smell of fresh bread from a bakery mingled with the acrid smoke of burning trash, and where laughter and gunfire were equally common sounds drifting from balconies. If you stood at the heart of the Quartiere Spagnoli, you would feel the pulse of a city that never truly slept. Mopeds buzzed like restless bees. Children chased each other barefoot, weaving between laundry lines that stretched across buildings like the flags of some secret carnival. Old women leaned from balconies, their voices carrying gossip, prayers, or curses in the thick Neapolitan dialect. And somewhere, always somewhere, an accordion played, a melancholic melody reminding everyone that life was fragile but burning. But beneath this carnival of life ran shadows, shadows of the Camorra, the underworld family that whispered in every darkened doorway. Deals were made with a handshake, debts sealed with blood, and dreams often paid for in silence. Naples was alive, but it was dangerous. And for those who walked its streets, fate could change in the span of a heartbeat. The man at the edge of the cliff. Imagine, then, an old man, broad-shouldered despite the weight of his years, with a salt and pepper beard that caught the last glimmers of sunlight. He sat at the edge of the cliff, overlooking the restless Tyrrhenian Sea, a battered wooden cane resting across his knees. His eyes, though dimmed by age, still carried a fire, as though he had seen too much yet forgotten nothing. He began to speak, his voice gravelly, shaped by tobacco, wine, and memories that refused to die. "You see this city, ragazzo," he said to no one in particular, as though telling a story to the wind. "She is beautiful, yes. Beautiful like a woman you can never trust. She kisses you, she loves you, but she also betrays you. And when she does it with a knife in the dark." A pause. The waves crashed against the rocks, filling the silence with a rhythm like the beating of a restless heart. "Naples. She gives life, and she takes it. I should know. I have lived long enough to see both. And what I will tell you now, maybe it is true, maybe it is only myth. But in Naples, myths often live longer than men. The streets and their secrets." The story carried us back into the streets. A boy named Luca, no more than 15, sprinted through the Spanish Quarter, his breath ragged, his heart pounding not just from exertion but from fear. In his pocket clinked stolen coins, hot and heavy, each one feeling like a curse. Behind him, footsteps thundered, shouts filled the air. He turned a corner, slipped on a wet cobblestone, nearly fell, but kept running. Past a church where candles burned like small prayers. Past shuttered shops covered in graffiti. Past a beggar who muttered a blessing, or perhaps a curse, as the boy flew by. Finally, Luca ducked into an alley, pressed himself against the wall, his chest heaving. The footsteps faded. Silence returned, but not peace. For in Naples, silence was never truly safe. Luca wiped sweat from his brow. His eyes, green like shards of broken glass, reflected both defiance and desperation. He was just a boy, yet the city had already forced him to grow into something harder. And as he stood there, catching his breath, he felt a strange presence, as though someone unseen was watching, whispering, guiding him. Later, he would swear that in that moment, he heard a voice, soft, almost musical, carried on the wind. "Not all gold is treasure, Luca. Sometimes it is the weight that drags you down." He spun around, but the alley was empty. Only shadows remained. Philosophy in the darkness. The old man's voice returned, as if stitching the boy's moment into a greater tapestry. "Life, ragazzo, is a game the gods play with dice. You think you choose, but it is they who laugh when the numbers fall. Fate, destiny, chance. Call it what you like. But in this city, your choices are never truly yours. Naples chooses for you." He tapped his cane against the stone, each strike echoing like a heartbeat. "And yet," he continued, "there is magic here. Real magic. Not the kind you read in books, no. Magic that hides in the cracks of walls, in the eyes of beggars, in the songs of the fishermen at dawn. A magic older than the Camorra, older than the city itself. Some say the Greeks brought it when they landed here. Some say it was always here, buried beneath the sea, waiting to rise when the city needed her ghosts. The encounter at midnight. Midnight came. The boy Luca, restless, returned to the cliffside where the old man had spoken earlier. But this time, the old man was gone. Only the sea remained, black and endless, the moonlight painting silver scars across its surface. And then, from the shadows, a figure appeared. Not the old man, but a girl about Luca's age. Her hair was long and dark, her eyes luminous in the moonlight, as though they carried their own secret fire. She said nothing at first, just stared at him, and Luca felt both fear and fascination. Finally, she spoke. "You run fast," she said, her voice soft but steady. "But no one runs from fate." "Who are you?" Luca demanded, though his voice cracked. The girl smiled faintly. "A story," she said. "Or perhaps your future." And then she vanished, as though she had never been there. Return to the narrator. The old man's voice, once again, wove through the night like smoke. "You think Naples is only stone and sea, blood and bread. But no. She is alive. She breathes. She watches. And sometimes, she speaks. You only have to listen." The wind rose, carrying whispers that could have been waves, or words. And the story I tell you now, it is not just about a boy named Luca. It is about all of us, living in the shadow of fate, chasing light through the labyrinth of darkness. Listen carefully, for the streets of Naples remember everything, and what they remember, they never forgive. Morning in the quarter. Dawn came quietly over Naples, but the city was never truly quiet. Even before the sun rose, fishermen were already at the harbor, their boats rocking like restless cradles on the black water. They shouted to each other, their voices carrying across the waves, blending with the cry of gulls. Nets hit the decks with wet slaps, heavy with fish glistening like silver coins pulled from the sea. The smell of salt, oil, and tar filled the air. Somewhere, a priest's bell rang, marking the hour of morning prayer. But in the Quartiere Spagnoli, prayers were often whispered not to saints, but to survival itself. Luca woke to the sound of his mother's voice. She stood over him, her hands on her hips, her eyes already weary though the day had barely begun. "Luca, sveglia. Wake up. Bread won't buy itself." He groaned, rubbed his eyes, and sat up on the thin mattress that served as his bed. Their one-room apartment was cramped, the plaster walls stained with dampness, the ceiling cracked like an old scar. But for all its poverty, it was home. "I'll go, Mama," he said, though his voice carried little conviction. She sighed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "And don't run with those boys again." "You think I don't know? I hear things. The Camorra is watching, Luca. They're always watching." Luca looked away. He knew she was right, but he also knew that boys like him had little choice. Either you played the game of the streets, or the streets swallowed you whole. The old man returns. Later that morning, Luca wandered back to the cliffs. To his surprise, the old man was there again, seated as before, staring out at the sea as though it held every answer to every question. The boy hesitated, then approached. "You were here last night," he said. The old man chuckled, though it sounded more like a cough. "I am here every night. The sea speaks to me. Do you not hear her?" Luca frowned. "The sea doesn't speak," the old man said, tapping his cane against the rock. "Then you are deaf. Or perhaps too young. The sea has more voices than any church choir. She tells stories older than Rome, older than this city, older than you or me. Listen long enough, and you will hear them." Luca sat beside him, drawn by something he couldn't explain. The old man turned, his eyes sharp despite the haze of age. "Your name," he said suddenly. "Luca." The old man nodded slowly, as though tasting the name. "Luca. Light. A good name, though not an easy one. Light attracts shadows. Ragazzo. Remember that." Seeds of philosophy. The old man began to speak again, and Luca listened. "Do you know what life is?" the old man asked. "It is not bread, not coins, not even family. No. Life is story. And story is fate. We live it, we breathe it, we suffer it, but most of all we repeat it. Your story, my story, Naples' story, they are all the same. They only change costumes. One day you are the thief. The next day, you are the victim. And one day, if fate wills it, you are the king. But in the end, ragazzo, every king becomes dust, and every thief becomes legend. Luca frowned, trying to grasp the weight of those words. But we can choose, can't we? He asked. We can decide who we are. The old man smiled sadly. Ah, if only that were true. You think you choose, but it is the city that chooses for you. The streets mark you. The alleys carve you. You are not free, Luca. None of us are free. The only freedom is how we face what is already written. He looked back to the sea, his voice softening. But sometimes fate allows a crack in the wall. A moment when choice slips through, like sunlight through shutters. That, Luca, is the only moment that matters. And it comes only once. Whispers of the Camorra. That evening, as the sun dipped behind Vesuvius, painting the sky in blood and gold, Luca found himself once again on the streets. This time, he wasn't running. He was walking, though perhaps walking into danger. At the corner of Via Toledo, he saw them. Men in dark suits, their hair slicked back, cigarettes glowing between their fingers. They weren't old, but their eyes were eyes that had seen too much, done too much, and felt too little. One of them, a tall man with a scar along his cheek, looked at Luca and smirked. Hi, ragazzo, come here. Luca froze. He wanted to run, but something in the man's gaze held him. Reluctantly, he approached. You've got fast legs, the man said. I hear you outran Antonio's boys yesterday. That takes courage. I wasn't, Luca began, but the man cut him off with a wave. Don't lie. Lies are for priests. I like truth. And the truth is, you've got talent. The streets speak through boys like you. Maybe you're ready to work. Maybe not. We'll see. The man dropped a coin into Luca's hand. Not just any coin, but one stamped with a strange symbol, a serpent devouring its own tail. Bring this back tomorrow night, the man said. And we'll talk about your fut. Then he and his companions melted back into the crowd, leaving Luca trembling, the coin burning in his palm like a curse. Night thoughts. That night, Luca lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling of his room. His mother slept beside the dying fire, her face lined with exhaustion. He turned the coin over and over in his hand, unable to let it go. The old man's words echoed in his mind. Light attracts shadows, ragazzo. The city chooses for you. But he also remembered the girl at the cliff, her voice like music in the dark. No one runs from fate. Luca closed his eyes. Sleep came slowly, and when it did, it was filled with dreams, of the sea whispering secrets, of serpents devouring themselves, of a city alive and watching. And somewhere in those dreams, he heard a voice, ancient and endless, whispering his name. Luca. Narrator's closing of Chapter 1. The old man's voice returns once more, soft, deliberate, like the final notes of a song. And so, the boy takes his first step. The streets of Naples have seen countless boys like him, hungry, desperate, burning with fire. Some become kings. Some become ghosts. But all become stories. Listen well, for the city writes in shadows, and the ink is always blood. The coin and the choice. The next day came heavy, like a sky full of unspoken storms. Naples bustled as always, vendors shouting about fresh oranges, children darting through narrow alleys, the aroma of espresso floating from corner cafes. Yet for Luca, the world felt smaller, tighter, as if every shadow held eyes. The coin still weighed in his pocket. Every time he touched it, he felt as though he touched not metal, but a decision that could not be undone. He remembered the man's words. Bring this back tomorrow night, and we'll talk about your future. Future. The word itself was a trap. Did a boy like him even have one? His mother wanted him safe, far from the reach of men in suits and serpents. But the city whispered otherwise. Opportunity came dressed in danger, and Luca knew, deep down, that the Camorra did not offer. They chose. Return to the old man. By afternoon, he found himself once again climbing the rocks near the sea. The old man was there, as always, like a statue carved of time. "You came back," the old man said without turning. I have a question," Luca muttered. "Good," the old man replied. "Questions are the bones of wisdom. Ask." Luca pulled the coin from his pocket, letting it glint in the fading light. "They gave me this. Said to return tonight. What do I do?" For a long time, the old man said nothing. He only stared at the sea, his expression unreadable. At last he spoke. "That coin is not money. It is a key. And every key opens a door. But some doors lead not to rooms, but to prisons. Do you understand?" "So I shouldn't go?" Luca asked. The old man's laugh was hollow. "Do you think you still have a choice? You carry their mark now. They will not forget you. If you do not go, they will come. If you go, you step into their shadow. Either way, the story has begun." Luca clenched the coin. "Then what would you do?" The old man finally turned, his eyes sharp as a hawk's. "I am not you, ragazzo. My story has already been written. Yours is only ink waiting for the page. But remember what I told you, sometimes fate leaves a crack in the wall. When you see it, do not hesitate." The meeting. Night fell like velvet soaked in wine. The streets were alive with neon and noise, scooters darting like fireflies between cars, music spilling from open windows. Luca's steps echoed as he walked toward the place where the man had spoken to him. They were there, waiting. The tall man with the scar smiled when he saw him. "Bravo, ragazzo. You came." Luca held out the coin with a trembling hand. The man took it, slipped it into his pocket, and nodded. "Good. That means you belong to us now. From today, you are no longer just another street rat. You're Camorra." The word struck Luca like a hammer. He wanted to protest, to say he hadn't agreed. But the truth was, his presence there was agreement enough. "What do I have to do?" he asked, his voice small. The man's grin widened. "For now, nothing difficult. Run errands. Deliver messages. Carry packages. But remember, Luca, every package has weight, and some weights are heavier than stone. Carry them well, and the city will open to you. Fail and—" He snapped his fingers. The sound cut through the night like a blade. The first task. They gave him a small package wrapped in brown paper. No explanation, no instructions beyond the address. A crumbling building near the docks. Luca walked quickly, heart pounding. He wondered what was inside. Money, drugs, a weapon? His hands shook as though the paper itself might burn him. When he arrived, an old woman answered the door. Her face was lined, her eyes tired but kind. Without a word, he handed her the package. She nodded, pressed a coin into his palm, not a serpent this time, just ordinary money, and closed the door. That was all. Simple. Too simple. Yet Luca understood. This was a test. A boy who obeys without question is a boy who can be trusted. Dreams of serpents. That night, he dreamed again. The sea roared in his ears, but instead of waves, serpents rose from the water, their bodies twisting in endless circles, devouring themselves. From the cliffs, the girl sang, her voice weaving through the chaos like light through smoke. "No one runs from fate," she whispered again. He woke drenched in sweat, the echo of her voice still in his skull. The old man's warning. The next evening, Luca returned to the cliffs, desperate for answers. "They've given me work," he said. "Just errands. But it feels wrong. Like every step is a step deeper into something I don't understand." The old man nodded slowly. "You understand more than you think. Errands become tasks. Tasks become crimes. Crimes become chains. That is the path. Once you walk it, each step is harder to turn back from." "But I don't have a choice," Luca whispered. "No," the old man agreed. "But you have something more dangerous, the illusion of choice. And illusions, ragazzo, are what bind men tighter than chains." He leaned closer, his voice low. There will come a day when they ask you to do something that will stain your soul. That will be your crack in the wall. Do not miss it. Narrator's closing of Chapter 2. The voice of the narrator returns, calm but heavy, like a confession whispered in a cathedral. Asterisk. And so the boy entered the shadow's embrace. What begins with errands will end with blood. But remember, even in the darkest labyrinth, there is always one thread of light. The question is not whether Luca will find it, but whether he will have the courage to follow it. Asterisk. Whispers of the city. Naples breathed differently now. For Luca, every corner, every shadow seemed alive, carrying secrets in hushed tones. The city that once felt like home now looked like a stage, and he was the actor forced to play a role he had never chosen. Days slipped by, and with them came more tasks. He carried letters, small parcels, whispered messages. On the surface, they were harmless. But Luca knew, the harmlessness was only a mask. Each step bound him tighter, like invisible ropes around his chest. The old man's warning echoed in his mind. Errands become crimes. Crimes become chains. Still, he obeyed. What choice did he have? The first real test. One night, the scarred man appeared again, his sharp grin catching the light of a cigarette. "Tonight, Luca, you prove yourself," he said, tossing him a small leather bag. "What's inside?" Luca asked. "Do not ask questions. Deliver it to the man at Via Marina. He'll be waiting by the red door." This time, Luca's stomach knotted. He could feel it. The weight was different. Heavy, not like money or paper. Something metallic clinked inside. As he walked through the narrow streets, the bag felt hotter with every step. He imagined what it might be: a gun, bullets, or worse. His palms were wet, his throat dry. The city around him blurred. Neon signs, vendors, laughter, curses. All he could hear was the pounding of his own heart. When he reached the red door, a man in a dark coat was waiting. Luca froze. "Give it here," the man growled. Luca hesitated. For a moment, the old man's words rang in his head. "There will come a day when they ask you to stain your soul. That will be your crack in the wall." This was it. He looked at the bag. He looked at the man. Then he thought of his mother, of the girl in his dreams, of the serpents devouring themselves. "What's inside?" he asked, his voice trembling but firm. The man's eyes narrowed. "Not your business, boy." "Then I won't deliver it." The man stepped closer, fury in his face. "Do you know who you are defying?" "Yes," Luca said, though his knees shook. "But I'd rather live with fear than with a soul I can't bear." He dropped the bag on the ground and ran. The chase. Footsteps thundered behind him. The man shouted, curses spilling into the night. Luca darted through alleys, past laundry lines swaying like flags of surrender, past barking dogs and flickering street lamps. The city became a maze, each corner a choice between capture and escape. His lungs burned, his legs screamed, but he didn't stop. At last, he scrambled up the rocks by the sea, the place of the old man. The waves crashed below, furious and wild. The old man was there, watching silently, as though he had been waiting all along. Luca collapsed beside him, gasping. I refused. They'll kill me." The old man nodded slowly, not surprised. "Good. You found the crack. Few ever do. But now what?" Luca cried. "They'll hunt me. I'm finished." The old man placed a hand on his shoulder. "No. Now, you begin. The revelation." The waves surged higher, and in their foam, Luca thought he saw serpents again, twisting and writhing. But this time, the girl's voice rose above them, clear, fierce, undeniable. "Courage is the only weapon they cannot steal," she sang. The old man's eyes glimmered in the moonlight. "Do you know why I sit here, ragazzo? Because once, long ago, I too carried a coin. I too walked their path. And like you, I found the crack. But instead of fear, I chose exile. That is why I am still here." Luca's breath caught. You were one of them?" "Once," the old man admitted. "But no more. And now, perhaps, it is your turn to write a story not of chains, but of freedom. The sea roared. The night pulsed with possibility. Luca, trembling yet unbroken, understood. This was the moment his true journey began. Narrator's closing of Chapter 3. Asterisk. And so the boy defied the serpent's coil. He ran not from fear, but from destiny's cage. What he left behind was danger, yes, but what he carried forward was rarer than gold, the seed of freedom. The city would not forgive. Shadows would not forget. But in the heart of the hunted boy burned a fire, the kind that could light even the darkest labyrinth. Asterisk.